Hello, listeners. This is your old Uncle Ian back again with a real special one. Today, I'm talking to Dan Mongrain. That's Chewy to you from the one and only Voivod. Dan, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
It's been a busy year for Voivod. 2022 has given us Synchro Anarchy and a total surprise to me, the Ultraman maxi single. So I think we've had Synchro Anarchy out for a while. Let's start with the Ultraman.
Yeah, well, I had the idea uh, during way before we started writing for the album, and it's funny. I have the DVD here, just watching the first season. From 1966. It's quite old actually, but yeah, I had this idea because Voivod did cover of Batman back in the day. Remember? And also Captain Scarlet, and I was fooling around, and I thought I don't know how I thought about it, but I started to fool around with the music, and it was not even for Voivod actually at the beginning, just having fun with it, and I thought, wow, that would be great. So I suggest to the guys, and they grew up with Ultraman. I remember we could when we had the black and white TV. We could watch the series, but it was translated from Japanese to French because we all speak French here. So we would watch it in French, and it was kind of very different than any other superhero we knew, and the concept of it and all that. And I remember I'm a bit younger than the other guys, so I remember I thought it was real, like the monster and the costume and the models. For me, it was all reality. There was no zipper hidden. And then watching it again, it's quite amazing the work they done with not much. It's pretty credible. It gets your imagination going, and I think it struck us as a younger boy in our childhood. And so the music is kind of it's sang by children originally in Japan, and it's a kind of easy to sing for kids. It's kind of a joyful song. It's not like a super heavy, mean, and that's kind of contrasting with the what happens in the series a bit. And so I had the challenge to reduce a kind of a smaller orchestra because there's flugelhorns and bass clarinet and stuff like that in the composition. And it's a great composer that did the music for the series as well. Um, and so I kind of adapted for guitar. So I took some of the lines from the flugelhorn and some of the elements and I put it in my riff and make it more like a Voivod vibe. And I kept the background surf guitar, doom 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 doom, and I changed one or two notes just to make it a little bit more dissonant. But it was already some element was already there, like the main punch. It sounds really Voivodian. So it was fun to do. And when I suggested to the guys, they were all in because they loved the series as well and the character. And we felt we all needed Ultraman to save the world a few months back. So that's pretty much the story about it.
I love it. And you brought up sounding Voivodian, and I think that you've got to be the world's expert on that, I guess. Uh, so I've you must have had a real tough time step. I mean, maybe I'm being presumptuous, but if it were me, I would have a really tough time stepping into Voivod, and I'm confident I could cover a Voivod song. I'm not at all confident I could write new Voivod material.
Yeah, it's a totally different job for sure. Um, actually, at the beginning, we toured for 5 years without writing any new stuff. It was not even talked about. But at some point, it felt like, okay, playing the old song is great, but uh, we work on some stuff uh, back in the day, and I played it on the bus, and we heard about it and said, "Who's playing? It's just a demo, fooling around, you know." And that's where I think we started to think it was possible to write music. At first, it was kind of I was feeling like an imposter. Still, the guys were very welcoming with me. They always I would always speak like I was not in the band, uh, like I would speak with the pronounce uh, uh, like you Voivod, you know, not us. I would not say us back in the day, but it's not because of them. It's because I felt that way. And but with the years gone by and the touring and all that, and trying to write stuff, every idea was welcomed, and we jammed a lot. And the the band that I've listened to the most in my entire life was Voivod. You know, I discovered the band I was 11 years old, and then I bought a guitar, and then I started my own band, and I always was inspired by the band. So it's part of my musical education, so I could speak the language because I learned it at a young age as well. It's part of my musical DNA, so to speak. And when we played in Voivod's own town, and we I finally met Piggy's mother and sister and father, and they gave their blessing for the band to continue. I felt all right with all of it, you know, and to go on and continue and to it's one of the best way to pay tribute to what he did and what he created, to go on and play live and to continue to write new stuff with the world he created, you know. So yeah, we're still writing new stuff and touring. It's quite amazing after the band is about to celebrate their 40th anniversary. So
Amazing. Now my head honchos here make me promise to not talk about guitar nerd shit the entire time, but I want to talk about it for some of the time. So they can edit this part out if they don't like it, I guess. But I was watching some of your playthrough videos and comparing the a Martyr playthrough with a Voivod playthrough and how the tech. So the Martyr one is what you expect to see from metal guitar playing. You got your spider fingers, you got your down picking. It's metal. The Voivod playthrough is to me really stunning in how very uh, calm and loose your hands are.
Hmm.
And how very simple the left hand is in comparison to the Martyr playthroughs, but the right hand look I played some traditional folk dance music, and you're doing this figure eight style boom chucking technique, and I was really amazed to see that a lot of the perceived complexity of Voivod playing is coming out of what for a metal player would be a very unusual right hand technique. So could you please geek out on something like
Yeah, of
that with
course.
me?
It's a really good observation, actually. And I like to get into that kind of stuff. So it doesn't show, it's harder to perceive on the martyr stuff because the style is more, the way of playing is more like a surgical, very precise way with a lot of subdivision. And but I tend to keep my playing my hands loosen, never stiff, because if you go stiff, it's over, game over. You can't move your finger around. You cannot be you can't keep stiff and play that kind of extreme metal. But with Voivod, I've learned to play more in a different way, because Piggy was very groovy and he was very bouncy on his instrument. Like the right hand would bounce on the strings like a trampoline, so to speak. And that's true that when you play folk music and picking, and we were seeing doing the wiper, you know, the right hand just comping the chords, you need to have this kind of balance and groove and looseness. Is that a
Okay.
word in
Yeah,
English? I don't know.
absolutely.
Yeah, and because if it's stiff, it's not gonna groove. It's not gonna sound good. You will lose the balance of the rhythm, and you'll lose the sound and the bottom of the sound. If you too much into the string, it's gonna sound more aggressive, too aggressive, and your your uh, your best friend as a guitar player is always your right hand, because there's no sound coming out of the guitar if you don't play the strings with your right hand. You can be a very fast left hand player. If you don't struck the string, no sound will come out of it. And if you don't have a good rhythm with your right hand, you can play the fastest note you can with your left, but it's a rhythm instrument. It can be a melodic instrument, can be, but at first it's a percussive instrument. So um, yeah, you have to play with a loosen hands, and to play some Voivod stuff. The left hand challenge is not a visual one. It's very impressive to see some fingers go fast on the neck. It's impressive for the audience. It's impressive to see a drummer go with rolling the sticks and big gesture and all that. But it's not really the challenge. The challenge is to make every note of your chord uh, simmering. I mean, what's the word? You have to hear every note and make it as a whole. And if there's one note missing, the chord is incomplete. So if your hands are not damping the right strings and letting the right string ringing, that's the most challenging thing, especially with strange chords that your hands not used to play. It's not a G or an open C. It's a kind of a complex chord with a major seven and a sharp nine and all that. So it's the balance between the two. But you're right about the loose hand, the loose right hand. It's very important.
How long did it take you to come to that realization? Or more fun, I'd like to know, is there a song from the old Voivod before your days catalog that you had to learn to play that really burned your brain up, trying to figure out how to really approach it?
Not really, because I knew the songs very well in my mind, in my ear, inner ear. Some of the riff were pretty intricate to find exactly what Piggy played, and sometimes I played too many notes, and the answer was in removing the harmonics that you would think he played, but it's just an harmonic resulting of a tritone, because tritone is makes harmonic explodes because of the vibration and the dissonance. There's a lot of artifact harmonics created, so sometimes you think he would play those notes, but they were created because of the dissonance. So that's the fight I had to deal with. But for the parts and the riffs, it was really well composed, well written, and the bass and guitar were always conversing, like having a good conversation, complementarity between each other. So it made it easy to learn the parts, because it was well written, so you could hear very well everything. The voicing and dissonance, I was used to it, the sound, so I knew it was not a fight for me to find the right note on the right time or the right chord. I had it in my already in my ear.
That's amazing. So, but part of that equation then must be that further on down your signal chain, to be getting those, ghost tritones that are coming out. That's got to do with making sure your EQ's just right, your gain's just right. And one thing that I don't like about a lot of contemporary metal is that the guitar sounds are all kind of the same now. It's obvious everyone's got the same plugins, everyone's got the same software. They're all double tracking the same amount, and it's honest to God, very hard for me to if you were to just play me a section without vocals, I couldn't tell you the difference between one band and the next based on their
Yeah,
guitar tone. But you've survived it. You're not a victim of whatever's causing that problem. And I've
I
told you so
think
much.
I fell
How do
into
you
that.
survive?
I think I fell into this trap when I was with Martyr a little bit. Like we scratched the surface of being the prisoner of that kind of sound, but at some point it felt like a prison to me to have this kind of pickup into this kind of amp because it that's everybody using this right now, so we have to use it. It's kind of a trend, you know. But when you go with only the music you write, it kind of tells you what kind of sound you need to make it efficient and not the other way around. I write notes first and then I deal with the sound. Some people does the opposite, and there's no bad way of creating. But for me, the notes and the interaction between notes, it's a combination of both, of course, but kind of dictate me if I need more mid or more bass or more gain into the sound. When we play Voivod song material, I really need to turn down the gain of my distortion, because if I put too much distortion in complex chords, it results in more and more harmonics, and it kills the chord, and it kills um, the harmonics the chords are creating naturally, because you add some harmonics to create distortion. That's what it is. You add harmonics, but there's already harmonics accumulated by the dissonance. So you need less gain to let those harmonics live and do their job, and expand in time and space. So that's why I reduce over the years less gain, less gain, because when I use the complex chords, it becomes a problem. It gets muddy and it gets less definition, and it also give the bass more space when I do that. So I prefer to double the track with less gain, and doubling the track creates a little bit more harmonic, so more distortion and more power. But it makes the uh, panorama uh, wide, and there's space for the other instrument. Nothing is in the way.
That's incredible. And you said earlier that you're writing together as a group, and you're honestly one of the few groups I've talked to in the past couple of years that's doing that. Even post pandemic, people are saying, "No, we're just sending stems back. We don't actually play these songs together or write together." But you're genuinely writing together as a group.
Yeah, it was more difficult for Synchro Anarchy. I have to say we shared some files and we worked separately, but we ended up in the studio before recording. We tried the stuff together, and it defined some of the parts and some of the details, because we would know that naturally we will play this over the program stuff or the individual stuff we did separately. So when we jammed the songs, it confirmed some of the parts and some of the vocal melodies and all that. So we did that stuff, but we wished to. I know. Anyway, it brought that kind of different color to it. So we used it as a challenge and a creative tool instead of complaining about it. But for sure. If there's no more lockdown, we're gonna get back together and jam, because it's where I think there's a lot of happy accident happening in a jam, and that's what you want to keep and create around.
The interaction between all of the members of Voivod to me is something that makes it distinct from its imitators. It's stunned me for the longest time. I'm the same age as you, so I grew up on Voivod, and I thought this is such a great idea. Why doesn't everybody try to do this? But there wasn't really any Voivod imitators for the longest time, and then in the new millennium there were some, but they've got things like the guitar tone right or the time signature switching up the font things like that. But one thing a tell that this is not the real McCoy is the interplay between the musicians. That's really really thoughtful. Like I've heard voivodish riffs over a pretty standard drum beat, but that's not how you play voivod drums.
Mm, it's a combination of things. Snake has a very, very unique voice, has a very great sense of melody in chaotic structures and very chaotic chords, but he always come up with the maybe the only possible melody you can whistle over a very rich harmony, like very dissonant harmony. But he comes with something like a guy like Ozzy would do on a simple structure, so to speak. I don't want to compare both, but it's just an example. But he did this all his life. That's what pretty much his only band. He played in other stuff a bit, but so he was used to Piggy's dissonance at an early age, and he always did something great in that environment, which is amazing to me. Sometimes I have to record his ID right away because I know it's exactly what the song needs. And Owe got a very particular sense of groove and time, and he plays the drums like a melodic instrument. It's not just a percussive instrument. He's gonna put the accent where it needs to be on the riffs, and he understands the riff. He's a real musician. He's a composer as well because he structures the songs and he has a vision of what's coming next. What what could be the part after this one? And sometimes he write a drum beat before we write any note on it, so we can compose on a drum beat idea. And that's what we did that quite a lot on in Synchro Anarchy. Actually, I had a lot of ideas here and there. He put them together, and in the space, he put some drum grooves. And I had to write something. It was quite a challenge. So everybody's bringing their input to the writing side, and we tried to make it work uh, in a musical way, but also in a kind of how do you say it, architectural way. Uh, because if you build something complex, it's easier to crumble against. Yeah, I mean, crumble, destroy itself. It's not, if it's not well built. It's easier if you just put four walls of concrete. It's pretty easy to be stable and not crumble. But if you start to do all sort of fancy design, it can be very beautiful, but it can crumble at any time. So you have to make sure that every part of the puzzle is well designed and it's solid as well as beautiful and more complex. So it's the more you add the dissonance or odd time stuff, the more risk you take that it can crumble. So it's a hard job, but at the same time, it's a passion to go that road down that road. It's really it's good for the brain. It's good for it's a big it's very draining. It's demanding, but it's an accomplishment to achieve something at the end of the day when you hear it and it works and everything falls into place and it's solid, even though it's complex. It's a satisfaction for sure.
Yeah, and I hope this sounds like the compliment that I mean it to be. I've never met somebody from the metal scene that didn't know about and absolutely respect Voivod outside of the metal scene. You know, maybe there's some prog fans and some alternative fans who are in it, but it's not that same universal. There's something metal fans absolutely get about what Voivod is that other kinds of music fans don't, even though there's some appeal there too.
Yeah, I mean, we played a lot of event where we were the only metal band invited, and that was very interesting to me. I love playing metal festivals and all that. I love the metal crowd. I love the fans. You know, they're really die hard and they're all there and they support us. But once in a while, we play in a jazz festival in Montreal. You know, and we played the Primavera Festival in Barcelona, and we were the only metal band playing there. There was a reggae band, industrial music there. There was a rave after, but the promoters were really into all kind of stuff, and they were really culturally their knowledge of different scenes were wide, and so they invited Voivod because they knew Voivod has a certain sound, and it's a kind of they develop their own language at an early age in the process, in the early albums, and so it's very interesting to play like next year at the Prognosis Festival for it's more of a prog festival, and to be invited in some event outside of metal. It's always great, but of course, I think the metal is not far it's not far from I mean they come from the metal scene, and I remember the studs and the weird guitars, and the punk attitude as well, and the screaming and all that, and it's always in there somewhere for sure.
Do you have different set lists when you do the non-metal gigs?
It depends on the event, but we try to change set list quite often, actually. For the Montreal International Jazz Festival, I did an arrangement of a brass quintet for one of our song because I wanted to something special for the festival, and we discussed it, and I started to write maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the event. So it was for the end of dormancy, and people went nuts in the audience. A lot of people didn't know Voivod, but and a lot of people were there for us. And when the brass quintet arrived on stage with Voivod shirt, people went nuts, and we did the end of dormancy, which was in fact based on a Ben Hur kind of vibe when in the old movie Ben Hur, and they're in the boat, and there's a drum playing the rhythm, so the people will row. The slave would row. Is that the right
Yes.
verb? Yeah,
Yes.
and they got to war speed and fighting speed and stuff like that. So you have this acceleration in End of Dormancy. And during the Banner movie, there's a lot of trumpets that remind us of Rome, and quartal harmony and stuff like that. So it was the perfect song to do an arrangement with brass for. And we opened the form of the song to have an improvised saxophone solo in the middle, it was all diminished chord harmony, so very tense, but we played with the dynamics like a jazz band, and people went totally nuts, and it was great. So we have this version on an EP with the End of Dormancy live on one side, and we hired the same guys to go in the studio because we felt that only the people in the audience that night had access to this performance. So we recorded and overdubbed the brass section. We called it the metal section over the studio version, and we did the video with this version as well to share it to the world.
That's amazing. I'm gonna have to track that down. I can't wait to listen to it.
There's a couple of citation, a quote in the arrangement I did. I quoted John Williams' Star Wars lick, and I quoted Bela Bartok from Hungary, a contemporary composer from the Miraculous Mandarin. There's a lick in there. There's a section that I kind of how do you say borrowed. So for people that knows those uh, uh, this music, they will recognize it for sure.
I want to wrap this interview up in the most unfair way possible by asking you about something you're not expected to know about. Voivod albums are often thematic. There's a Voivod world. Uh, I've never been able to explain it to anybody else. Could you please explain how you understand what the Voivod thematic world is?
Actually, the Voivod character died, I think, during the Phobos album. So it's been a while, and I was not in the band back in the day, but I know that Voivod is a nuclear vampire, and it's a complex story, and it's a concept, and so the story evolve from album to album, and the character as well. And there's a lot of a freedom of interpretation in the lyrics. It's not like uh, you can interpret the lyrics differently in the stories, but maybe a way or snake would be better to explain it because I remember when I grew up listening to the band, I didn't understand English, and I think they had it they, themselves back in the day. They had to make them their text to be translated with friends that were speaking the language and all that. But I know that there's very crazy stories, and it's hard to kind of explain everything in a few seconds. But I invite everybody to read the lyrics and to read the introduction of Dimension Atros. It's quite interesting. The guys were really deep in sci-fi and technology and other dimensions and aliens and stuff like that. So it's really hard to explain. Actually, you're right, because there's a lot of stuff going on, but it gets your imagination going, and I think once you get the vibe, it's a vibe more than anything, I think. And once you get it as a fan, before playing in the band, once I was hooked on Voivod, I was hooked for life. Like, and that's what I feel when we play shows. There's people from every ages, and now they bring their kids with them, and it's a beautiful thing to see. I remember playing in Europe, and we were playing a 17-minute song back in the day called Jack Luminous, and a guy comes with his son on his shoulder, and he was singing the whole song by heart with his ear protector. And we met them after the set, and it was fantastic. Anyway, so I don't know. There's some memories like that comes back to me. Maybe it's because we're going on tour in a few days, and I can't wait to meet those guys again. Because when you're on tour, you make friends and you see familiar faces again. It's been like 3 years we didn't go to Europe, so I mean we went for a few festivals this last summer, but for a whole 5-week tour, it's got to be fun to meet again with the fans and friends. So
Incredible. Yeah, you and I actually met in 2016 when you played in Providence. I was a generic drunk guy telling you how much I loved you.
oh, oh yeah, I remember you. You were that guy. Okay, okay.
So I'm
Nice
glad to be able to
again.
talk to you sober and clearly light a day to make up for that.
Well, it's the joy of going to shows, and it's the perfect timing to do that. So
I appreciate you. Well, before I let you go, is there anything else you want to say before we close this interview up?
well, check out the new Ultraman EP. It's funny because I sing on in Japanese on it, and Snake is singing in French and English. It's quite fun, and there's two live songs from Return to Morgoth on it. It's two songs we didn't put on the deluxe edition of Synchro Anarchy. And Morgoth is Jonquière. It's the city where the band is from, and we can't wait to go back touring in the West Coast, the East Coast, and the North America, and can't wait to hit the road and go to Europe as well. We hope to meet everybody, like I said before, all our friends out there, and to play for you guys. And it starts again, so let's do it.
Let's do it. Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Catch you on tour, Chewy.
Cheers.